Hey Sherry, do you know Madame Blueberry from VeggieTales?
I do.
Do you know why she's blue?
I don't.
Because she's been stealing shirts out of my wardrobe. Right? Let's hear about it. This is the real story with Adam and Sherry. I'm Adam Hamalian,
And I'm Sherry Hutchens.
and this is where two broker associates with 35 years of experience talk about all things real estate. Hey Sherry,
Hey there. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Doing pretty well. I think you need to explain the blue shirt reference for our
Oh
audience who
yeah.
may not be following you on Facebook or Insta.
Yeah, so somebody pointed out that I wear a lot of blue shirts. In fact, I wore two almost identical shirts to Ace Hardware back in April, and the paint person had to stop and do a double take before she was confirmed whether or not it was the same shirt or a different blue shirt. And I assured her it was different.
I think she asked you, do you have the same shirt on today that you had on yesterday?
She did, yes. But then she looked at it and decided it was something different. And so I decided just for grins to do 31 days of May wearing a different blue shirt each day. And
I love that.
today is the 27th, and I got 4 more days to go. I think I'm going to make it, but we'll find
Huh?
out. I'm not 100% sure. And if those of you that would like to follow me on Facebook or Insta, you can see that I posted a different selfie in a blue shirt every day so far. So,
I thought it was a really good idea. I liked that you combined it with a different location every day as well.
yeah, several different coffee shops. Although I've gone to Brioche probably three times. There's three photos of me at Brioche.
All right. Well, that's our office away from our office, so
Yeah,
that's okay.
yeah. Um, well, let's talk about the market. Anything interesting happening in the market this week?
There seems to be some changes afoot. I'm not sure if it's market driven or if it's just that next month or is summertime and things slow down in the summertime.
Yeah, graduations last week and this week. People
Yep.
kind of putting their home searches on pause while they sort out the end of the year, maybe vacations.
Our first 3-day weekend.
Yeah, mark the beginning of summer.
Yep.
Um, it does seem like even though we got a couple houses in the escrow this last week, it's
Mhm.
kind of hit and miss. And I think a transitional market is still kind of the name of the game, and some well prepared homes and some homes not well prepared at all are selling, and then there's others where they're just not quite there and they're just not really inspiring, and buyers are like, yeah, I'll wait.
Yep. I track the solds every single day. I go on the MLS and see what sold and how much it sold for. And I also track price reductions, and we're starting to see price reductions for the first time in a really long time,
Yeah.
as well as homes that are not selling for full price. Some are still selling for over, not as many as there were a couple months ago. But we are seeing things that are selling for significantly under their list price, which
Mhm.
is a big change for us.
Yeah. Pricing is always an important conversation, and I feel like right now it's even more so.
Hmm.
Sometimes lowering
Absolutely.
the price isn't necessarily the right thing, as opposed to just being prepared that you're going to receive an offer below your list price.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think that as agents and buyers are sorting through the inventory, sellers and their agents need to be aware of the the most recent activity, not something from 3 months or 6 months ago, but what's been happening in the last few weeks.
Yep. Looking at trends.
Yeah.
Good thing.
What
It's part of
one of
pricing.
the interesting things for us right now is we have had a couple closings and then a few more listings that are all in homeowners associations governed by a homeowners association. And
Yes.
that's been playing a role in the market as well. And that's going to be our topic for today. We're going to talk about HOAs in good ways, maybe bad ways, maybe ways to celebrate, and ways that are just downright annoying.
Yeah. You call HOAs the canary in the coal mine.
Well, yeah, specifically condos. Yeah, I think that
Hmm.
we see those be the first things to lose value in a transitional market, and they're the first things to recover.
Yep.
Because people are a little, it's one more hurdle. Some people are reticent to buy a home that is governed by a homeowners association, perhaps for good reason, but for others, because of the lower price, because of the HOA fees, they can be a great entry level or somebody who's budget conscious
Yep.
purchase.
Yep.
And it actually having the HOA governing can be a good thing financially also, though it's not
Hmm.
a blanket statement across the board. Um, you want to just kind of give a definition of HOA?
Homeowners Association is, oh, you always ask me hard questions. Um, it is when a group of homes, whether they are condos or single-family homes, are a part of an association that is governed by a board of directors made up of homeowners, and usually with the involvement of a property manager as well, that oversees and coordinates all of the well, mostly about the paperwork and the work that needs to be done to maintain a property.
Yeah.
How's that?
Yeah,
What
that's good. I mean, the HOAs can span everything from a loose association of single family homes all the way up to something that was built initially even as an apartment building and then divided up into condos and
Yeah.
everything in between.
And
Uh,
it can be 10 homes or it can be like Rossmore with 7,000 homes.
yeah, yeah. And Rossmore is probably the most complicated example of an HOA because as homes were built in Rossmore as clusters, they formed those clusters that were built at the same time formed their own HOAs, which Rossmore
Mhm.
calls mutuals. And then all of the mutuals together are governed by the Golden Rain Foundation, a kind of overarching homeowners association, though technically not exactly a homeowners association because Golden Rain is a corporation,
Mhm.
but they work together. So what are some while we're kind of talking about what are some positive things as a home buyer or homeowner that and it bet you would benefit from a homeowners association?
Well, I would think that it would be that it sets and defines rules about what a homeowner can do to their house. You can't decide you want to paint your house hot pink. You have someone else taking care of the exterior of the home most of the time, so you don't have to save money for to have it painted every 10 years or to have a roof replaced every 20 years or even do your own landscaping. Oftentimes, an HOA takes care of exterior landscaping. And if you are the type who likes to swim, but you don't want your own pool, your HOA might have a pool, and that's maintained by the HOA as well. It can include tennis courts, bocce ball courts, you name it, all kinds of different amenities.
Pickleball courts.
Pickleball courts, yes, we're seeing tennis courts being converted to pickleball courts now, as well as clubhouses that you can rent and have parties or home class, or not class reunions, family reunions and things like that there for a small fee. So it's like you take care of the interior and somebody else for a fee, your monthly HOA dues takes care of the exterior.
I think it's a great situation for somebody who maybe isn't handy themselves and would always be hiring someone to do some
Mhm.
maintenance, to not have to worry about searching out and finding the right person for the right job. That the HOA already has maintenance people either on staff or relationship with contractors to come take care of that.
Yeah.
So it can be really peace of mind is not exactly the way to say it, but it can take some of that stress of home maintenance out of
Mhm.
your hands and you're basically paying a monthly fee for that to all be collectively done for you,
Yeah.
for the exterior, like you were saying.
Yeah. Yep.
Um,
Always for the exterior. In a most typical in a condo, and am including townhouses in that because townhouses are condos. Townhouse is an architectural style, not a form of ownership. But the homeowner owns from the paint in, they own the airspace in and they insure that as well. They do not have to insure the whole property. That is taken care of by the HOA, and there's a master policy that covers that. And the homeowner gets something that's similar to renter's insurance called an HO6 policy, which is considerably less expensive than, especially nowadays, than insuring a whole home.
yeah. The So those are some of the positive things. What are some of the things that might be less exciting about having an HOA?
Well, some of our clients refer to HOA dues as a waste of money. They don't want to spend all that money every month. And I don't think they maybe really truly understand what that's going for, and the burden that it takes off of them as homeowners. And maybe it's just that they'd rather do things themselves. You know, they're willing to save the money so that they can replace the roof someday. And they're willing to hire somebody to do the paint job and somebody to do the landscaping. Um, I think people would probably look more kindly on HOA dues if they were tax deductible. They are not.
Yep.
So that's something that maybe needs to be. It's funny, during the recession, there was a period when HOA dues were tax deductible. And it went away when the market started to recover and we came back to a more normal market. But that was a good thing for homeowners.
You know, so the cost, it's a added cost, and it's a cost that you're not really in control of because the HOA can vote to increase it as needed. We'll come back to budget a little bit later. I
Yeah.
think one of the other negatives of HOAs is like we were referring to the benefit that your neighbor can't paint their house hot pink, but if you want to paint your house hot pink, you have some limitations. So it's not uncommon for an HOA to have an architectural committee to approve certain things. They might have built into their bylaws, here's the three approved front door colors,
Yeah.
or if you want to change your windows, you have to use this kind of window to replace it, or you have to
Mhm.
have a certain kind of window covering. Those are kind of extreme.
But we see those out there. We do see that, you know.
Yeah. Oftentimes restrictions on pets, right? And this works both ways. Like it keeps your neighbor from having 13 dogs, but it limits you in case you're a kind of person who'd like to have 13 dogs. You can't have 13 dogs.
Uh-huh.
Or size and sometimes breeds, but I think that some of those breed questions are becoming less enforceable.
Yes.
It's kind of like I remember hearing a sermon one time about the laws. Like you love the law when you're being mugged and the police officer pulls up with the lights and scares the mugger away.
Yeah.
But you hate it when you're driving on the road at 65,
Yeah.
66 miles an hour and you get pulled over for speeding, right?
Yeah.
And HOAs are kind of like that. They protect you from somebody who is not going to be super considerate, but they also limit you because they want you have to conform to the community use as well. So,
Yeah. There
uh,
are things that are completely out of your control and not in a good way. I sold a condo to a client probably 15 years ago. And at the time, the carports were in pretty bad condition, but the HOA document said that they were in the process of being replaced. And we closed escrow. It was a short sale. Closed escrow. She moved in, and the board of directors paid the contractor who was doing the rebuilding of the carports, and for some reason they gave him the entire amount of money, and he took the funds and skipped town.
oh no.
The carports never got replaced, and they raised the dues so they could start saving money to find another contractor and replace those carports. And that never happened. And eventually, what they did was they just tore down the carports.
Mhm.
And they kept raising the dues because they were having other deferred maintenance. It was a fairly old complex, and older complexes require more upkeep than new ones do. And just recently, they had another increase and said, we can no longer afford to maintain the pool, so we're going to empty the water, and it just won't. We're going to put a fence around it, and you won't be able to use it.
Yikes.
And the dues for this little two-bedroom, one and a half bath condo are up almost to
Oh
$900.
my gosh.
They don't have any amenities. They don't have carports.
Yeah.
They don't have a pool. They never had tennis courts or anything like that. And they're still talking now about an assessment.
Well, that's
So
kind of a horror story. Well,
it is a horror
it would
story.
scare
And
everybody away from something with an HOA. But let's
absolutely, because
let's
if
talk.
you sell it, you've got to disclose it.
Yeah. let's talk about finances a little bit because
Yep.
that is not a well managed HOA, and I
No, I
think
mean,
that one of the things when we're working with buyers, um, there's a couple things we think it's important for them to review. Obviously, the whole HOA packet, the rules, the any CCNRs,
yeah,
but particularly I like to point out the minutes of the meetings, but then
yeah,
also the financials. And the reason
yep,
why those two I think are important is because when you read the minutes, you can get a sense of what the group, what the HOA is working on, talking about, and how they solve problems.
yep,
So if it looks like they're voting on, approval of paying such and such for doing the landscaping, or paying, saving money to do a roof replacement next year, we're collecting bids so that we know how much we have to have. That shows an active HOA board that's paying attention to their ongoing expenses and trying to manage it well.
yep,
And if you see in the minutes what feels like petty little fights, like so and so got fined because their kid had a scooter parked on the front porch and that wasn't
yep,
allowed. It's like,
yep,
really, that's where you're going to draw the line. You're going to start finding people for that kind of stuff. You
yep,
may not want to be associated with people that are going to bicker about that level. But the finances are really where the rubber hits the road for an HOA, because some of those other things you can manage, but the finances, like you were describing in that one story, can
yeah,
really change um, your financial situation in ways that it's difficult to recover from.
yeah.
So we like to say, look through the budget. Have they budgeted for all the normal things, including regular maintenance? And
How much reserves do they have?
right. So they should have some sort of like a feasibility type study about, here's all the deferred maintenance and when we anticipate those things to come up. So it's a 20-year
Mhm.
roof and it's 15 years old. So in 5 years, we're going to have to replace the roof. Are they talking about it now and budgeting for it? And
Oh,
do they have cash reserves
yep,
that are going to accumulate so that in 5 years they can replace the roof without having to do a special assessment?
yep,
Um, and then how often have they raised the monthly dues? And this is, there may or may not be a right way here. It's kind of just a choice. So, like, are you the kind of person who'd rather save things along the way and not have big expenses?
hmm,
So, let them raise the monthly payment so that they can build that big cash reserve, or would you rather have an assessment, say $10,000, so that we can replace the roof all at
hmm,
once, or do it
hmm.
gradually over a few years. I think you were telling me what earlier when we did a couple transactions in a HOA where they kicked that ball down the road so far that it was a really huge special assessment.
Yeah, there was a fairly well-known community in Walnut Creek that had a siding issue, and for almost 20 years, they just kept saying, "We'll put a Band-Aid on it and try to, save the money so that we can do it the right way." And at one point, they did it partially, but didn't seal it, which caused some of the siding to leak and caused big insurance claims from homeowners. And finally, they had no choice, they had to do it, and it ended up being a $55,000 assessment per household, and there were 160 households. You can imagine um, how much money that was, and how hard it hit homeowners. I mean, I think there were some people up there who probably had $55,000 and it was or fair access to $55,000, but others had to finance it, and the HOA had to go out and work with a bank to procure financing for these homeowners so that they could all pay what needed to be paid so that the work could be done. So,
Well, what was crazy is that we had a house on the market right during the time they started doing the work, and they put scaffolding over the entryway, well, around the whole building, but you had to walk underneath the scaffolding to get to our front door, and that was what we were trying to sell. Hey, come buy this house in the middle of this construction zone. As they were peeling off the wood siding, discovering dry rot and repairing it because of deferred maintenance.
well, there were a couple things. One, our stager could get the small furniture in through that scaffolding, but she couldn't finish the staging job because she couldn't get the big sofas and dining room tables in. So we were waiting until that scaffolding was removed so that she could finish staging and we could get it on the market. In the meantime, they had taken windows out and a couple other things that kind of made the interior, the framing, not protected. And in the middle of the summer, it rained, which it never rains here, and rained significantly and got all those homes that were partially torn apart wet.
Yeah, that was
At which point that construction company got fired and everything came to a halt. We still can't get our furniture in the front door. And the HOA goes out and starts interviewing new construction companies to finish. Well, I mean, they were only on the first cul-de-sac. They still had 3 years of construction ahead of them, and it all stopped so they could interview new contractors.
that was crazy.
We had two houses up there. We had one that we sold before the construction started, and luckily our seller said, no big deal, just take the 55,000 out of my proceeds.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, not a good situation to be in. And
So
imagine
part
what
of
it did for the property values up there.
Yeah. Yeah, because they were very suppressed, not just the 55,000, but dramatically more so because it was this huge unknown.
Yep.
Um, well, that was the other thing I was going to bring up is talk about uh, that situation came about because of a poorly managed HOA.
Yep.
And so homeowners, it's a homeowners association. Homeowners decide who is going to be their board of directors and who is going to make these big decisions.
Yep.
Even if they hire a management company to handle the hiring of landscapers and contractors, it's a homeowners board that makes all those decisions.
Yep.
And people get on those boards for various reasons. Sometimes there are people who just have a burr under their saddle or a bee in their bonnet or whatever it is that they're just ticked off and they want to make something happen their way. And then there's other people that do it because they're concerned about it being well managed. But there's few people that have actually any training on how to manage a HOA and to take into consideration all the different responsibilities. And so hopefully they have somebody who they consult with to help them make these decisions. And if they don't, and it just is the most upset person, you end up in that situation where they can't make a decision to get the work done, and it
Yeah.
gets deferred to the point where it's a huge expense and a huge nightmare.
Yep.
So I like to see HOAs that do have a relationship with a property manager or a homeowners association management company that, again, doesn't do the decision making but manage it, because then they could say, hey, board, you need to be budgeting for X, and
Hmm.
you need to decide how you're going to solve that problem. Um, but that's not always the case. We sold a condo just a few months ago it was a smaller project, I think maybe 20 units,
Yeah.
self-managed. And they actually made some really good financial decisions. And one of the things that's live conversation right now is balconies. You may remember that there was a terrible incident that happened in Berkeley
Yes.
where a balcony collapsed. And so
Tragic.
consequently, there was a law created that all projects that have, I think, more than 4 units have to have their balconies inspected and certified.
Yeah.
And HOAs are in various states of getting that done. And so this particular, even though it was small, they did that inspection, they figured out what repairs need to be done, and they were working on it without having to do a special assessment, just out of the
Probably were in
budget.
contract. They were repairing balconies.
Yeah. And so very, very conscious of keeping their value of their homes up collectively. Um, but sometimes they don't get managed well at all. You end up with people that are just cranky. I think you were telling me about a HOA where the architectural committee walked around and cited people. Is that?
Yes, I lived in an HOA here in Walnut Creek at one point, and every single morning, the architectural committee, which was largely made up of original owners who were in their late 70s and 80s and didn't have to go to work like the rest of us, they would walk that 400 unit complex every single morning with their clipboards and write down anybody who was violating their rules, which could be anything from leaving oil spots in the driveway when you park your car, to me having my Aunt Lemon Tree touch the stucco. I I had just a little courtyard in front, and I love lemon trees, as you know. I rescue lemon trees that don't have a home. And this was my first of many, and it was just a little tree that was supposed to be, it was probably more a bush, and maybe 4 feet, 5 feet tall at the most. But this one had aspirations and decided that it was going to be 14 or 15 feet tall. It went up to the roof line and a little beyond, and I would get 400 or 500 lemons off of it every year. But this architectural committee hated that tree because heaven forbid the leaves would touch the stucco. And I can't tell you how many times I got written up because of that lemon tree. And at one point they were going to charge me a $200 fine if I didn't do a drastic job of pruning it so that it didn't touch the stucco.
Yeah.
And that turned me off of HOAs for a really long time.
If they could only see your lemon tree forest that you have in your backyard now.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, Sherry adopts lemon trees like they're, going feral or something. But anytime we have a listing and there's a potted lemon tree and the seller doesn't want to take it with them and the buyer doesn't want it, Sherry makes sure that nothing happens to it and she takes it
Yeah.
home and she
Yeah.
nurtures it and
Yeah.
she's got all the lemons in the world.
Yes, yes, more than I ever need, but at least these trees aren't getting thrown out. I don't know what it is about lemon trees, but anyway.
Well, yeah.
You know,
Um,
self-serving HOAs remind me, this is a little off topic, of when Clint Eastwood, who famously lives down in Carmel, wanted to do something and the city council would not allow him to do it. And he thought, forget that, I'll just run for mayor, which he did and won, and then did whatever he wanted to do to his property while he was mayor.
yeah.
And then when his term was up, he let somebody else be mayor. But it happens like that in HOAs too.
Yeah, yeah. So you were talking about the architecture committee. I mean, there is some good benefits to the architecture committees. I mean, you told a kind of an extreme example, though not uncommon. But if somebody wanted to do some remodeling inside their house, there's obviously lots of things that can be done that are perfectly fine. But sometimes they want to start moving walls, and it's important that they, in a condo situation where all the units are connected, that you don't move something in a way that might compromise the integrity of the building. And so by having an architectural committee, it protects you from your neighbors doing something, but then also it helps you get some guidance on how to do yours safely and soundly. And that can play an important role. It also keeps your neighbors from painting their house an obnoxious color, prevents you from painting your house an obnoxious color.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't think it's obnoxious, but your neighbor might. So there definitely, that is one of the benefits of having an architects committee at a HOA.
Yeah.
What are some of the best things you've seen in an HOA?
Um, Best things. I guess it would just be, oh, I know. You might not think this is the best thing, but we sold a house down in Danville, and there were two stipulations in the CCNRs for a self-managed, self-governed HOA. One was that there were no two-story homes allowed, and the second was that everybody had to pay $25 once a year to pay for the neighborhood Christmas party.
Hey, how can you beat that?
That's the best thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, yeah.
The most bizarre thing you've ever seen.
Oh, well, so we had a client who had a pet rabbit. And
Mhm.
uh, as the story goes, they got the pet rabbit when their kids were younger. But now both their kids are young adults. One's out of college, one's in college. And so dad is taking care of this rabbit. I have no idea how long rabbits live or the kind of species here.
He looked
And
pretty healthy to me.
he did. He was very cute, very well behaved. I mean, literally
Big.
well behaved. I mean, I heard stories of rabbits like chewing everything out. This house was immaculate, and the rabbit was not locked in a cage. He had his own little corner, but he was not
We
locked.
weren't allowed to wear shoes in the house, but they had a rabbit.
Yeah, exactly. And they were thinking about selling, and so we were going through some documents, looking at the pulling title report, looking at the CCNRs, which is covenant conditions and restrictions,
Mhm.
and the specifically it said in the CCNR, no livestock, no chickens, and no rabbits. And we thought, how could this really nice family be breaking the rules of their CCNR by having a rabbit? It was so ridiculous. We did read a little bit farther, and it was clear. It seemed likely that the restriction on rabbits was for raising for food and maybe for selling, and so
Yeah.
there was some carve out for domesticated or personal animal. I forget what the word was, but
And
so
it was from the 1940s
and it
when
was from the
I'm sure
19.
nobody could imagine anybody would have a pet rabbit.
Yeah. There are a lot of things in CCNRs that are unenforceable, particularly around fair housing stuff. And so there's always a blanket statement that said, if it violates fair housing laws, it doesn't apply. But I don't think that rabbits are protected by the fair housing law, I'm sorry to say.
They are not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Luckily for Rufus, he gets to stay.
Yeah. Lucky for Rufus. Yeah. Um, Rental restrictions, both
Yeah,
positive and negative around rental restrictions for HOAs.
yeah,
It used to be that HOAs could ban rentals altogether because one of the things that we have discovered is that homeowners tend to maintain their homes and interact with each other in a way that supports home values better than tenants do. Nothing implied explicitly better or worse about the people, but
yep,
just when it's your own investment, we tend to take better care of our own things.
yeah,
So they would limit renters, and then the state of California said, "Oh, you can't limit it 100%." And there are
mhm,
some caveats. So it's not uncommon to see limits around 25%
yeah,
renter to owner occupied. Um, and some of that comes into play with actually lenders as well as just anything around buying and selling.
yeah. Many, many years ago, there were limits on how many lenders put limits on how many properties could be rented, and if there, it was, I think at the time, 30%. If more than 30% of the properties in a given complex were rented, they wouldn't make a loan on it. They
Yeah,
did not think it was a good investment. But now we see things that have 50% renters and they still get loans. So I'm not sure what changed in that regard, but it
yeah.
did change.
Um, and so if you're buying into a something that has an HOA and you think I'll live in it and then when I upsize I'll rent it out,
Hmm.
there's always a little caveat there that you should pay attention to the CCNRs and the HOA documents regarding rental restrictions because that may not be possible. They may be at a limit. You may need to be on a wait list. There's
Yeah.
no guarantees around it, so you got to pay attention to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We talked a little bit about finances earlier. We talked about budget and
Mhm.
monthly dues. One of the things that's very alive right now for HOAs, like all of California, is insurance.
Mhm.
And so an HOA budget is based off of their monthly HOA dues of all their homeowners. And when the people HOAs are experiencing like homeowners, single family homeowners, those insurance rates are going up out of proportion to inflation. And
Yeah.
so it's harder for HOAs to figure out how to manage that. And they're having to raise HOA dues for
Yeah.
their homeowners. And even to the point where some HOAs are choosing not to get a full insurance replacement. And
Yeah.
that is causing lending problems right now.
Yeah, we covered that in another podcast as it relates to Rossmore, where I think they're only covered like 80%. They kind of took a gamble and said, what are the chances that all 7,000 homes are going to burn down all at once, plus all the clubhouses and amenities? And said, we're willing to take that chance. And we think that if we insure it for 80%, we'll be okay. But the lenders didn't like that. So
Yeah.
that caused problems, not only with getting loans out there, but with property values.
Yeah. Yeah, and HOA, and this is probably part of you've heard me talk about being condos being the canary in the coal mine. This is part of that equation is because of the nature of making group decisions and trying to figure out a balance between increasing homeowners' cost in a responsible sort of way, but then also maintaining the fiscal responsibility around being insured,
Yeah.
that tends to compromise home value. So, because if your monthly budget is say $2,000 a month for housing, that includes the HOA, and if the HOA fee goes up, that means you have less available in your monthly budget for a mortgage, and
Yeah.
it suppresses the mortgage or suppresses the home values because you have less
Yeah.
people that are interested in buying or capable of buying.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'd say right now that the two big kind of legal financial issues around homeowners HOAs is insurance, and we talked about the balcony issues if they've taken care of that.
Mm-hmm.
And those two things together are making the HOA and condo market very soft right now, kind of
Mm-hmm.
leading into as an indicator of what's happening in the rest of the market. And the
Yeah.
question is, will we find a new floor that then will support the rest of the market,
Yeah.
or will HOAs just become unsellable? And will they be bought up by um, corporate REITs? So we'll see.
Well, you know what I always say, everything sells when it gets to the right price, and that will be the case with condos as well.
Yeah.
Um, we're not anti-condo, we're not anti-HOA. Don't don't misinterpret any of this. We think that they're a good fit for a lot of people, but when we hand you a stack of 4 inches of HOA documents, we intend for you to read through them and really understand what you're buying before you buy.
Yep. All right. Any other thoughts about HOAs before we sign off?
No, if you have questions about any of it or would like to look at some of the better HOAs out there, give us a call.
If you liked our podcast, be sure to like and subscribe and pass this on to your friends. It's been great. Remember, Dorothy is right. There's no place like home, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.